Almost 2 years ago, I ran 6 50Ks in 6 days, and I wanted to explain this because one, I think it's an entertaining, fun story, and two, I have a couple strategies that I learned from this really extreme situation that I've been able to apply to my running to stay healthier and avoid injuries because I learned a lot from that volume and how crazy it was. I think part of that week it totaled up with my runs from the days before these 50Ks, so I hit a 212-mile week, which is crazy. It's the biggest week I've ever done. And so I have a lot I've learned from this that has been able to keep me healthy as a runner and help me figure out problems faster when it comes to injuries. So to set this up a little bit, I have a group of friends where every year they do a lot of different running challenges, but every year they do No Rest November and Sudden Death December. No Rest November is when you do a 10K every single day, no days off. And then once you get to December, you add a kilometer onto the run every single day until there's one person left in the group running. And so December 1st is 11K, December 2nd is 12K, and so on until there's one person left. And 2 years ago, I can't remember the exact date, but one of the last runs I did was 32 miles. I also happened to be in Mexico when this happened, which was not planned. I did not think we were going to go this far, and we actually made it past December, which at the time had never happened in the history of this group doing this little challenge. And then I got to the point where I was flying to Mexico for a work thing. And so that morning, actually, I had to go run the 50K at midnight, like I started at midnight and finished it before I flew to Mexico. So anyways, the reason why it was 650Ks is because once I got to 46K, I just remember thinking, well, it's so close to a 50K, why don't I just run a 50K every day until it gets past that in the little challenge, just to get a 50K streak? Because about a year prior to that, I ran 10 marathons in 10 days. So to up the ante a little bit, do 6 50Ks in 6 days, or I didn't even really have a whole plan of how long I was going to go, but because I was in this challenge, I was just like, I'm already here, like why would I ever get to the point where I'm running 6 50Ks anyways? But I mean, why would I run 10 marathons in 10 days? So anyways, right before I finished the 46K run on that particular day, because that's the minimum mileage we had to do, I decided to run a 50K. And the next day was 47K, which is pretty close to 50K, right? Just 3 more K. And so I did that, and then did the 49K, 47K, 48K, 49K, 50K, 51K run. And I believe 52K was my last run in the challenge, and I actually took second place out of this group of friends. I didn't have all the stuff I needed for the challenge in Mexico because I just didn't pack my electrolytes and extra pairs of shoes and whatnot, so it was hard. But there was something that I learned from this that helped me in future training. I think when you do something extreme like this, it's not optimal per se for training necessarily, at least physically. But for me, mentally, I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about my body and what happens under stress and the things that cause injuries, or what we think are injuries. And I'm going to get to that in a second. But one of the things I learned is when you slow down, you can do a lot more. I think a lot of runners, especially new runners, and I did this when I got into running, was we run pretty hard every time we run, even if it's a couple days a week. And it kind of makes sense, right? You got to run faster to get faster, right? But there's actually a whole big benefit to running slower or in zone 2 running. So if you have the time, go Google zone 2 running explained. Basically the idea is when you run in your second zone of heart rate, and there's like 5 heart rate zones in running, you build a base, an aerobic base, as opposed to working out anaerobically. And this is good for you because this is how you build endurance. And you do this enough, you're able to run at a faster pace at the same heart rate, so you're more efficient. And so also when you're slower, you can do more volume. And now maybe you don't want to run 60 or 650Ks in 6 days. But if you want to get better at running, a lot of the times more volume has to do with that. It's not the only way. It's not the most important thing per se. But if you want to be able to run more because you enjoy it, this helps too, is you slow it down a little bit. So maybe you're running 8-minute miles. Maybe you go down to 10, 11-minute miles. And you have to calculate your own heart rate zone. So that's why I would go look up a separate video on that if you're more interested in that. But one of the big reasons why I was able to accomplish this 6 50 Ks in 6 days was because I was not running my regular pace. I can run a sub 3 hour marathon, which is like a 650 mile average. And I was definitely not doing that when I was running the 50 Ks. I was doing more 12-minute, 13-minute miles, depending, sometimes 10-minute if it was a downhill. But when you slow down, you can do a lot more, and obviously this is going to reduce your injury. And we feel bad. This is the point I wanted to make, is I think runners tend to feel bad for going slower when in fact you should be feeling good about that because you're building a pace, you're staying healthy, you're becoming more efficient. And that's something to be celebrated and not feel bad when you post on Strava a 10-minute mile run or a 12-minute, or heck, you walked 15-minute miles. You should not be ashamed of that. In fact, you're getting better and doing things a lot of runners don't do. And of course, it's going to help you avoid injury. But two, the second thing that I learned from this was a lot of the times injuries are not caused by what we think they are, or the injuries are not necessarily injuries. Disclaimer, of course, like I believe overuse injuries can happen, though I think sometimes we think it's overuse when there's other factors at play. So when I quit this challenge on the 650K in a row, I did that run, and then I decided next day I wasn't going to run. And the reason why is I had this sharp pain in my ankle. And that really freaked me out because, yeah, I had these little pains or cramps throughout this whole challenge, and I was tired, of course. But the sharpness where I would step and not expect it, and then it would just shoot up my shin, that scared me a lot. And it was hard to run through that because it was random. It was a little frightening because it would happen every 15 steps or maybe every 2 steps, and I just could never I could never guess when it was going to happen, so I couldn't mentally prepare. It would just catch me off guard. And I didn't realize what I wish I would have realized when I first felt this ankle pain. But a couple months later, I ran a 100-mile race, and about 60 miles in, I was feeling the same pain. And it really freaked me out because I was like, well, maybe I never fully healed from this. I didn't take enough time off. And I adjusted the tongue of my shoe, so I pulled it over to the side a little bit, and I felt that it came off this certain point on my ankle. It's kind of hard to explain, but it wasn't rubbing up on this certain point of my ankle, and I didn't feel that sharp pain for the rest of the 40 miles of that 100-miler. And I realized in this moment that sometimes just friction or a little bit of tightness can cause what we think is an injury, and it's scary. Because what I realized is that part of the tongue of my shoe was squeezing this particular part on my ankle that caused this sharpness. And when I adjusted my shoe, it completely went away. And I'm pretty sure the same thing would have happened on the 650K. I was just too tired, wasn't thinking through it, didn't know that I had this particular spot, the way I would tie these shoes, that it would just squeeze this part of my ankle. And ever since then, if I ever feel this pain in my shin or something random that's a little uncomfortable and unusual, I adjust the tongue of my shoe, and most of the time it goes completely away. And so the idea is this: injuries are not often what we think they are, and there's a different cause for them than overuse. Yes, you can get stress fractures, of course, you can tear things, right? Though sometimes it has something to do with inflammation, that if you take care of the inflammation, it completely goes away. If you eat cleaner, less inflammation, you're fine. Maybe you're dehydrated. It could have to do with tightness. Maybe your quad is super, super tight, so of course your knee hurts, your quad is pulling on your knee. Or maybe you're just not strong enough. Maybe it's not an injury, but maybe you just haven't done enough weight training or yoga that strengthens more of the ligaments and tendons in those key spots like your ankles and hips and knees. And so sometimes there's other factors that if you experiment with, they fix an injury or completely prevent pains in the future that you might think, oh, I'm injured, I need to take 3 weeks off. And that's heartbreaking as a runner or an athlete in general. But I'm more of a runner, and it's heartbreaking to have to take 3 weeks off, 6 weeks off, a couple months off. It's very frustrating when you love the sport so much. And the thing is, maybe you didn't need to take that much time off. You just needed to implement some sort of strategy or adjust the tongue on your shoe so that you didn't have that injury or pain anymore. Isn't guaranteed that that's always the cause, but I think those things cause injury more than we think, and we oftentimes blame it on overuse. And here's the other thing, is like people take time off from running, come back and get the same injury. And it's like, well, insanity, right? It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Maybe you're not necessarily injured, you're just have this other factor that you're not taking care of that's causing pain or this injury, if it actually is an injury. So I hope you got something out of that video, or this video. I'm just overall trying to help people learn from my mistakes and help them grow their relationship with running. And I like talking about this stuff because running's kind of my life. So if you like this stuff, feel free to subscribe. If not, no worries. I hope ultimately you got something out of this video, and I hope I get to see you in another one sometime soon. Peace.